You work, you pay, you borrow, you repeat, and somewhere along the way, you start to wonder, why does it never get easier? Why does every raise seem to disappear? Why does every step forward feel like 2 steps back? The answer isn't laziness. It isn't bad luck. It isn't that you're not trying hard enough. It's something much bigger than any of that. A system, built long before you arrived, running exactly as intended. And once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. I need to ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly in control of your money? Not just managing it, actually in control. For most people, the honest answer is never. And we need to talk about why that is. Because the reason might not be what you think. It's not because you're bad at managing money. It's not because you don't put in enough effort. It's because nobody ever sat you down and explained how the rules of the game actually work. They taught you to follow the rules, but they never taught you who made them. Here's what I mean. From the moment you start earning, you're funneled into a system. Get a job, pay your taxes, take out a loan for school, another loan for a car. If you're lucky, maybe a mortgage, and somewhere in between all of that, you're supposed to save enough to retire. On the surface, it actually sounds reasonable, but take a step back and ask yourself, who benefits most from this arrangement? Because there's a good chance it's not you. The uncomfortable reality is that most people aren't building wealth. They're serving it. Every month, a large portion of what they earn flows directly to banks, landlords, lenders, and corporations. The system is very good at making this feel normal, even inevitable, but it wasn't always like this, and understanding that changes everything. Let's go back, not just a few decades. We need to go back centuries. In medieval Europe, the vast majority of people were serfs. They worked land they didn't own, fed a lord they didn't choose with a large portion of their harvest, and spent their entire lives in the village where they were born and raised. They weren't poor because they were lazy. They worked incredibly hard. They were poor because the entire legal and economic system was designed to extract value from them and concentrate it at the top. Now let's move to the 1800s. The Industrial Revolution changed everything, or so people thought. Factories were built, cities grew, millions of people left rural life behind and moved to urban centers in search of opportunity. And for a moment, it really did feel like a new world. But here's what actually happened. Factory owners, names like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller and their European counterparts, accumulated staggering fortunes while the workers on their factory floors earned just enough to survive. 14-hour shifts, 6 days a week, no sick leave, no pension, no rights whatsoever. Children as young as 8 working in coal mines. The trap didn't disappear, it just modernized. There were people who saw this clearly. In the early 1900s, a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor introduced something called scientific management. The idea was to study every movement a worker made and optimize it for maximum output. On paper it was about efficiency. In practice it was about extracting every possible unit of labor from a human body while paying as little as possible. His methods spread across industries worldwide. That logic is still with us today, just dressed up in different language. KPIs. Productivity metrics, performance reviews. Then came the 20th century and something genuinely new, the American middle class. In the years immediately following World War II, the United States experienced an economic boom unlike anything in history. Soldiers came home, factories converted from wartime production to consumer goods, and for about 30 years wages actually kept pace with productivity. Ordinary people could buy houses, send their kids to university, retire with a pension. It was real. And it was remarkable. But here's what most people don't know. That period was an exception, not the rule. It happened because of a very specific set of conditions: strong unions, high taxes on the wealthy, heavy government investment in infrastructure and education, and a geopolitical situation that gave American workers unusual leverage. When those conditions changed, the middle class started shrinking, and it has been shrinking ever since. Now let's talk about debt, because this is where the modern trap truly lives. In 1971, the United States abandoned the gold standard. Money was no longer tied to a physical asset. It could be created, essentially out of nothing, by central banks and commercial lenders. And since then, the amount of debt in the global economy has exploded. There's a number that should stop you cold. In 1980, total US household debt was around $1.4 trillion. Today it's over $17 trillion. That's not just inflation. That's a fundamental restructuring of how ordinary people relate to money. An entire generation has been conditioned to see debt as normal, as necessary, as just a part of life. Think about student loans for a moment. In 1980, the average cost of a four-year university education in the United States was around $10,000. Adjusted for inflation, that works out to roughly $36,000 in today's money. What is the actual average cost today? Over $100,000. And the wages waiting on the other side of that degree, for most people, don't come anywhere close. A young person graduating today with a degree in business or communications enters the workforce carrying $40, $50, sometimes $80,000 in debt, earning between $35,000 and $45,000 a year, living in a city where rent alone consumes 40% of their income. They do everything right. They follow the script, and they still can't get ahead. That's not a personal failure. That's a system working exactly as it was designed to. Now let's talk about the people who figured it out. Because they exist, and their stories are instructive. Take Warren Buffett. Most people are aware that he's one of the wealthiest people in the world. Fewer people appreciate how he thinks. Buffett didn't get rich by working harder than everyone else. He got rich by understanding one concept with unusual depth: compounding. He bought his first stock at age 11. He filed his first tax return at 13. He wasn't chasing trends or trying to get rich quickly. He was building a system, quietly, patiently, for decades. By the time most people start thinking seriously about money, Buffett had already been at it for 40 years. Or think about the story of Shaiba. You've probably never heard of her. She was a tax auditor who retired in 1944 with savings of around $5,000. She was never promoted. She never earned a particularly good salary, but she invested that money in dividend-paying stocks and never touched it. She lived modestly. She reinvested every dollar of return. When she died in 1995 at the age of 101, her portfolio was worth $22 million. She left it all to charity. And Shaiba didn't have an MBA. She had no connections on Wall Street. She had patience, consistency, and a clear understanding of how compounding works over time. Now let's contrast that with a different story. In 2003, a man named Richard Fuld was the CEO of Lehman Brothers, one of the most powerful investment banks in the world. Over the following 5 years, Lehman took on extraordinary levels of risk and borrowed enormous amounts to invest in the mortgage-backed securities we discussed in our previous video. When the system cracked in 2008, Lehman collapsed overnight. 25,000 employees lost their jobs. Retirement accounts were wiped out. What happened to Richard Fuld? He walked away with an estimated $500 million in compensation earned during those years. He faced no criminal charges. He founded a new investment firm. Life went on for him. These two stories, Shaiba and Richard Fuld, tell you almost everything you need to know about how wealth actually works in the modern world. Patience and discipline can build real freedom over time, but the real fortunes and the real protections are reserved for those who understand the architecture of the system itself. So what separates the people who achieve financial freedom from everyone else? It usually comes down to a single shift in thinking. Most people think about money in terms of income. How much do I earn? How can I earn more? But the people who are truly free think about money in terms of assets. What do I own? What generates income without requiring my time? Robert Kiyosaki, whatever you think of him, popularized a genuinely useful framework in the late 1990s. The idea that there is a difference between assets and liabilities. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. The home you live in is a liability. It costs you in mortgage payments, taxes, maintenance, and insurance. A rental property that generates more income than it costs is an asset. Most people spend their entire lives accumulating liabilities while calling them assets. The wealthy, the truly, generationally wealthy, think differently. The Rockefeller family, for instance, has maintained significant wealth for over a century, not by luck, but because they built legal and financial structures specifically designed to preserve and grow capital across generations. Trusts, family offices, strategic philanthropy that also served as tax planning. They didn't just make money, they designed systems to protect it. You don't need to be a Rockefeller to apply this thinking, but you do need to start thinking like an owner rather than a worker. And then there's inflation, the force that most people know about but very few truly understand. A simple example. Imagine you work hard, save diligently, and manage to put $10,000 into a savings account. Your bank pays you 1% interest. At the end of the year you have $10,100. Congratulations. Meanwhile, inflation ran at 4%. The things that $10,000 could have bought at the start of the year now cost $10,400. You did everything right. You still fell behind. This is why wealthy people obsessively move money into assets. Not because they're greedy, because they understand that holding cash is a slow bleed. Every year you sit on cash, inflation quietly transfers a portion of your purchasing power to those who own productive assets. It's not theft in the legal sense, but it is a transfer. and it flows in one direction, upward. The Federal Reserve's response to the 2008 financial crisis and again to the COVID pandemic was to print trillions of dollars and push interest rates to near zero. This flooded the economy with cheap money. And what did people do with cheap money? They bought assets. Stocks soared. Real estate exploded. Anyone who owned a home in 2020 saw its value increase by an average of 30 to 40% in just 2 years. Anyone who didn't own a home found themselves even further behind. The gap didn't close, it widened. So what is the practical path forward? Because I don't want to leave you with just a diagnosis. The point is to actually change something and make a real difference. The first step is clarity. You cannot fix what you cannot see. Track every dollar that comes in and goes out for 1 full month. Not approximately, exactly. Most people are genuinely shocked by what they find. Subscriptions they forgot about. Convenient spending that adds up to hundreds of dollars. Money flowing out quietly in every direction. The second step is reducing fragility. This means cutting the financial commitments that make you dependent and reactive. It could mean downsizing your living situation, selling a car you're financing, eliminating high-interest debt aggressively. Every dollar of fixed monthly obligation you remove is a dollar of freedom you reclaim. The third step is building real assets. And I need to be specific about what that means. An asset is something that generates income or appreciates in value without requiring your constant presence. A business you've systematized. A portfolio of dividend-paying stocks. Rental income. Royalties from creative work. A valuable skill set you can monetize in the open market on your own terms. You can start small. Start with what you have. But start with the intention of building something that works for you, not something you work for. The fourth step, and this one is very underrated, is protecting your mind. We live in an environment engineered for distraction. Every notification, every advertisement, every piece of financial news is designed to make you reactive, to make you feel behind, to make you act impulsively. The people who build real wealth are almost uniformly calm, patient, and deeply skeptical of anything that promises quick results. They study history. They think in decades. They don't panic when markets fall. They position themselves to take advantage of it. There's a famous story about J.P. Morgan, the banker, not the modern bank named after him. Someone once asked him what the stock market would do. He thought for a moment and said, "It will fluctuate." That's it. That's the whole answer. Markets go up and down. The people who understand that and plan accordingly end up owning more of the world every cycle. The people who panic sell at the bottom and chase gains at the top end up transferring their wealth to the patient ones. Here's what we need to take away from all of this. Financial freedom isn't about being rich. It's not about luxury or status or having more than other people. It's about having enough control over your time and your resources to live on your own terms, to be able to say no when it matters, to not have an unexpected bill send your entire life into crisis. That kind of freedom is achievable, but it requires understanding the system you're operating in. It requires rejecting the narrative that your financial situation is purely a reflection of your effort or your character, and it requires making deliberate, consistent choices over a long period of time. The good news is, you're already doing the hardest part. You're asking the right questions. You're paying attention, and in a world designed to keep you distracted and compliant, that alone puts you ahead. If this opened your eyes even a little, subscribe, because we're just getting started. There's a lot more to come, and it matters far more than most people realize. Don't forget to like and leave a comment if you enjoyed the video.